Yo, what's going on? What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to the channel. Please like, hype, subscribe. I am Bonisile, your host, the Footy Knows podcast. And today I'm talking about the Carabao Cup. Semifinals just concluded. Arsenal went through first, and then Manchester City basically took care of business against Newcastle just about an hour ago now. City made easy work of that. I was watching just loosely. I didn't think Newcastle were going to do the remontada, so to speak. Starting there, let's start with this game, today's game, and then go to yesterday's game, which was Arsenal's game. Yeah, I expected Manchester City to go through, but I was hoping Newcastle were going to at least show interest in defending their title because they're the holders of the Carabao Cup. However, it wasn't to be because the game within the first 30 plus minutes, Newcastle were a couple of goals down and they were 3-0 down before the 40th minute. Some comical goals, at least the two that Mamouche scored. City are worthy winners of this tie. This is not anything to do with them. They did what they needed to do. You play the team that's in front of you, and City handled them, and they were able to also give Rodri time in the last 20 minutes or so, last 20 to 15 minutes. Haaland the same, just to keep them ticking along. And a couple of goals for Marmoush, who hasn't been getting a lot of playing time. Goal for Reinders. I don't know what Newcastle were trying to do with that lineup that they went with. I think it looked like it was a 3-4-3. If they were trying to get into this game, maybe they didn't believe themselves that they still had a chance to get back into this game, Newcastle, because Wissa was on the bench and he's one of their better strikers or forward players. It would have been interesting to see if they had gone maybe 3-5-2 or 3-4-1-2 with both Voltamada and Wissa playing. But maybe they had an eye to the weekend as well, because everybody now is trying to, think forward, think ahead to what's coming. And Manchester City will be happy with what they were able to do today. They didn't have to work too hard to get this result because they have a game at Anfield this coming weekend. So I think Man City will feel really good about what they were able to achieve here today by while giving their so-called reserve, a lot of their so-called reserve players played today in front of the Nico O'Reilly kid. Rodri got to sit a little bit, and Nico Gonzalez played, and Mamouche got to play, and Haaland sat. I mean, they don't have a deep squad, City, so they still needed to use quite a few of their first team players. Foden played quite a bit. Also, Cherki was also on the bench. So, they were able to rest at least 3 starters, right, in Cherki and the goalkeeper. So they were able to rest the goalkeeper, Cherki, Rodri, Haaland. That's about 4 guys who will who will definitely start at the weekend when they go away to Anfield. So they set up a cup final against Arsenal in late March, which means Arsenal and City, if they both progress to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, they will play each other 4 times in a space of 27 days. The cup final, 2 legs in the Champions League in the quarterfinal, and then the away game in the Premier League at the Etihad, Arsenal's away game at the Etihad. Who knows what happens in the FA Cup? I mean, if the FA Cup also creates a tie between these 2 teams, they'll probably be sick of each other by the time the end of May comes. They'll feel like they're living in each other's houses by that point. There's a big chance, definitely, for these first 4 games to happen, because I think City will probably get to the quarterfinals, and I think Arsenal will too. I mean, obviously, you don't take anything for granted, but on probability, both teams have gone through in the Champions League phase through to the last 16. And so that means both teams will have to just get through one tie to keep alive the possibility of them facing one another in the Champions League. Because Man City qualified as the 8th place team and Arsenal were the 1st place team. That means they are on a collision course, right? To face one another in the quarterfinals, unless one of them drops out in the last 16. Arsenal played yesterday against Chelsea. Going into the second leg, they brought a 3-2 lead from the first leg in Stamford Bridge 2 weeks ago. Most Arsenal fans, which I'm one of them, were not happy with how close the game still felt, or the tie still felt, leaving Stamford Bridge. As a result of that, last night's game was a very nervy game, because Chelsea knew that all they needed was 1 goal. Their approach was tailor-made to try and do that, to just try and stay in the game as long as you can, because once you start opening back doors or going gung-ho against Arsenal, you will get clipped. And I've heard a lot of criticism for Liam Rosenior's approach, but I think part of him was probably looking at what he had in talent and what Arsenal are able to do, what he's had in time and coaching ability in terms of time together with his team versus what Arteta is able to do with his group. The Arsenal players are more fluent in Arteta's brand of football or what Arteta wants from his team than Chelsea are. And Chelsea are trying to learn, fast, and they're clever. Great players, these kids. They're young and they're good. So this is not me making excuses for them. However, I do think he's catching a lot of stick for what I thought was actually a really decent approach to being away from home to a team that's clearly better than you. You're talented. Arsenal is a more complete team at this point than Chelsea is. So Rosenior did what he thought he needed to do, and the game was still alive going into the 90th minute. Now, Chelsea were lucky not to concede a penalty on Martinelli, because that should have been a penalty. Trevor Chalobah, I know he and like most footballers do, that he protests, claims his innocence and whatnot, but that was a naughty tackle. I'm surprised VAR let it go. I can understand the referee on the field maybe missing the hook with his left foot, because Chalobah gets the ball, but his tackle kicks the ball with his studs onto Martinelli's right foot, which kind of controls the ball by accident. Martinelli kind of stops the ball from traveling out towards the corner line, the byline for a corner. And so because of that, the ball is still within reach as Chalobah is on the floor with Martinelli still on his feet. Chalobah then proceeds to lift his left leg. He knows what he's doing there. I am just surprised that the VAR didn't give that. And I'm happy that, no Arsenal fan has to complain or, cry about it, because Arsenal did take care of business eventually. But it was a really weird game, and I don't mind the tactics. You got to do what you got to do if you're Rosenior. But at the same time, Arsenal also didn't have to force the issue. They knew that if they keep the clean sheet, they're in the final. And they did keep a clean sheet. And Chelsea were limited to shots from outside of the box. I don't remember Kepa having to do too much, really, except for maybe one or twice in a corner that, he looked a little bit insecure, maybe once or twice from a corner. But outside of that, Kepa hardly had anything to do. And David Raya got a day off, and Arteta, besides basically changing David Raya, the left wing and the number 10, he kept the same team as he did at Leeds, because he went with the same back four, right? Nkapia, who was good yesterday, really good yesterday defensively. And he was tireless running up and down that flank, offering options. He's not the most gifted in the attacking thirds, from the early signs anyway, from what we've seen. He doesn't look like he's the most gifted fullback of the fullbacks we have in that attacking third. He's a bit more timber than Ben White and Calafiori, but he's a very good defender. He's a really, really good defender, Piero Nkapia. Very intense, and some people maybe like him to be a bit more calm, but I like the fire. I like the intensity with which he comes into tackles. He doesn't go in recklessly, but he's aggressive. Controlled aggression from what I've been able to see. I like his approach to the game, but he's not the most aesthetically clean, pleasing player, but he's a good player. He's the player that I think, when I think back to what I hoped Kieran Tierney would have been for us, I think Piero Nkapia for me is that guy. He's the kind of player Kieran Tierney would have been had he not maybe been injured too much during his time at Arsenal. And then, of course, Gabriel Saliba, ever so reliable, and then Timber at right back, which makes me wonder anyway, I'll think about the Sunderland game in a little bit. But Rice and Zubimendi is a double pivot. They played ever so well in terms of being the protectors, keep trying to make sure we keep the clean sheet. No Arsenal player was clean on the ball on the day, because Chelsea played a 5-4-1. I thought it was a 3-5-2 initially, but it was a 5-4-1 where they made sure that they denied spaces in the midfield. And once they did open up a little bit later, they paid the price. But yeah, on the left wing, it was Martinelli instead of Leo Trossard. And then behind Gyökeres, it was Eze, instead of Kai Havertz. Eze played the whole game. Martinelli played the whole game, and I think that's again another good use of resources. Been kind of wanting Arteta to do a little bit more of that, using the breadth of the squad. And yes, as it didn't pull up trees, with his on the ball stuff, but he showed discipline. He showed that he could be trusted in a game where you needed to keep a clean sheet, and we're gonna need him. We're going to need Eberechi Eze. I think Martin Odegaard's injury or niggle or whatever it is that kept him out of the squad yesterday was maybe a blessing in disguise for Eze, because I don't know if he plays from the start yesterday, if Odegaard is available, and I don't know if he plays, at all. But with Odegaard with a niggle and Mikel Merino being unavailable for a stretch and Saka being unavailable for a stretch, it means now Eze gets to get some time, and I hope he shows, because a lot of fans are still, the fans are way on side with him. The fans are still rooting for him because he's such a good guy and he's a good player, trying to figure out maybe how to fit into this place. That, he loves the club, he's a fan of the club, he was at the club as a boy. There's still fears that he could turn into a Grealish at City kind of situation, right? But it's early. It's early. I think let's see how the rest of the season plays out, because there's a lot of new relationships to figure out for him and for the teammates. But happy for him that he got a full 90. Happy for Martinelli that he got a full 90. Finished the game on the right wing again. I like Martinelli down that right flank, especially when teams are chasing the game, because it forces him to be more of a crosser, but at the same time he also comes in having the ability to see the whole picture of the field. I think sometimes, because he's such a head-down player, playing on the left is not always the best for him, even though that's his preference. He prefers to play on the left, cutting onto his strong foot. But I think Martinelli, for me, is a bit more Jesus Navas than, some of these other tricky wingers who can dribble with the ball, with his face and head looking at the game at the same time. He's very head-down, kick, chase kind of winger. And he had some good moments. He had a terrible miss. Like the shot got blocked by Gusto, and he was played through by Gabby. It was a lucky little situation. The ball had a good bounce for him. He gets ahead of the defender, but then the bounce makes him leave the ball behind, and then he has to spin around, and instead of kicking with his right foot, he has to spin around and kick with his left. By the time he's gone and done all of that, Gusto has had enough time to come in and cover and make the block. I think it would have been a goal without Gusto's goal, but it would have been one of those like bobbling shots because Martinelli doesn't make clean contact with it. But it was a good game for Martinelli. It was a good game for Eze to get a good 90-minute run out there in a high-pressure situation. And then we have Sunderland coming to the Emirates over the weekend. So Arsenal, played a really good game until from minute 1 to minute 97, 98, and the great way that it ended for Kai Havertz and the Emirates celebrating. It made the previous 95 minutes worth all the high blood pressure, the blood sugar level raising, and all the other stuff happening. Basically, the team getting that goal to win the second leg as well, to make it 4-2. Many would feel 4-2 should have been the scoreline coming out of Stamford Bridge to begin with, or 3-1 or 5-2. The second leg, going into the second leg with one goal up, was very, very flattering to Chelsea, and which explains a lot the way Chelsea played the first 65, 70 minutes of this second leg. Because they were very open in that first game, and Arsenal had their way with them. Besides just scoring, and a couple of good saves from Robin Sanchez as well. Robin Sanchez, I think, not Robin Sanchez made some really good saves in that first leg. I remember one from Merino that should have been a goal, but great save from him. But he also chucked in a few. So it was a bit of a weird game for him, that first leg, because he made some good saves to keep the score low, but he also donated some goals to Arsenal. So I think, going into the final now, that's about 6 weeks away. Arsenal doesn't have to think about that for some time, and that's gonna be pretty dope to see how that turns out, especially if City and Arsenal are still in a race when it comes to the Premier League title race. We don't know how, obviously, how things are gonna go between now and then. We know that Liverpool and City have a game at Anfield this coming weekend, and Arsenal are hosting Sunderland. not a gimme. But if you're Arsenal and you're serious about really fucking finally taking advantage of some of favorable home fixtures, you really have to do the best you can to just get results. Get results. Arsenal don't have to leave London in the Premier League, but for like three times between now and the end of the season. So they're going to be in London, which also is a problem because London derbies can go one way or the other. But a lot of away games, when they do come, will be against teams who are in the bottom 10. The only team in the top 6 they have to play against away from home is Manchester City. Tottenham is still going to be a tough outing because, it's the North London derby. But again, that's still in London. So like traveling wise, it shouldn't be too strenuous. It might be strenuous in terms of physicality because of derbies can be, physical and all of that. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how things turn out with Arsenal and Sunderland and whatnot. Let's start there first. Game by game, stay humble and make no assumptions. But yeah, like the final between Manchester City and Arsenal, it'll probably be one of the most watched finals in the Carabao Cup because both of these two teams are basically the pick for most people to win the Premier League. I know a lot of people are, outwardly saying Arsenal has already taken it and Arsenal, it's 6 points. Arsenal has lost bigger leads to Manchester City. So until it's done, it's not done. And I know most people who are of the Arsenal persuasion are not buying into the hype. But the outside noise is, anointing Arsenal champs really early so that they can have a good off when it doesn't happen. But I hope the boys are mature enough, and I believe they are, but I hope that even in reality, they're mature enough to understand what's at stake here and just believe that they're good enough to see this through, because they are. They've done the yards, they've done the hard bits. They've gone through the disappointments. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed, but I hope at least mentally that they have the fortitude to stick it through and still be alive in the Premier League come end of May. And it's going to be very interesting to see how those four games, should they happen against Manchester City, how they play out. It could be a case where City reassert themselves and show us like, hey, y'all thought you arrived, we're still the big brother. Or it could be a case where Arsenal announce themselves and say we're not the big little bro anymore and basically take advantage and put City to bed finally. Anyway, I'm out. Cheers.